Hi, I'm Dr. Jack West, medical oncologist at City of Hope Comprehensive Cancer Center in Los Angeles. This is West Wind, a podcast focusing on the intersection of cancer care, emerging technology issues in medicine, and healthcare policy. You can find information about subscribing at beaconmedic.com or wherever you find your podcast content. Please leave a review, especially if you like this, and we'd also love to get your feedback at westwindpodcast@gmail.com. I'm happy to be joined today by Dr. Joan Schiller, who is a medical oncologist with a specific focus on thoracic oncology over many years, and she's currently on the faculty at the University of Virginia. She also is the prior Lung Cancer Committee Chair for the Eastern Cooperative Oncology Group, where she led a lot of the pivotal research that has shaped our standards of care in the field of lung cancer over the last couple of decades. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Jack.
So, let's start by talking about what led you to enter into the field of lung cancer, particularly at a time when the treatment options were so limited.
I had just finished my fellowship. I was in Madison, Wisconsin, which was a lovely small town for raising a family. And my husband and I wanted to stay there. And at the University of Wisconsin, they had one position open. And they asked me which disease did I want to specialize in. And I said lymphoma. And they said, no, we have enough lymphoma docs. So I said, okay, breast cancer. No, they have enough breast cancer docs. And so I said, well, what don't you have enough of? And it's lung cancer. And that's how I got in. And the reason being is at that time, there was no career opportunities for people going into lung cancer. There was no research funding. The treatments were terrible. It was just considered a dead-end disease, pardon the pun.
Yeah. And honestly, that's part of how I entered into it. But I did find at least that it was a very welcoming community to join. The
yes,
other people in the field, it's not territorial. Everyone just wanted to foster the careers of other people to go into
yes.
it. Yeah. But it really has changed a lot over the last couple of decades. I remember in my fellowship, we would debate a paper about whether it was actually worth treating advanced non-small cell for a benefit of a month or two, especially when you're talking about cisplatin-based chemo. And
without the antiemetics that we have now.
Exactly. Yeah. And people were questioning whether the treatment was worse than the disease.
Yeah. And second line, nobody even thought of second line. That was right.
It's amazing how far we've come.
Yeah.
But how easy or hard was it to get people to conduct research and rally the troops for a cooperative group trial back at that time when it might have seemed like we're just banging our heads against a wall?
Yeah. It was definitely rolling a stone uphill, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
But the people who were doing lung cancer were dedicated individuals, and they were dedicated to their lung cancer patients, and they wanted to do something to help their lung cancer patients. So they just kept on plugging along and hoping that whatever advances that happened in these other disease sites would eventually trickle down to lung cancer. The other thing is one of a famous person in the area at the time said lung cancer was the field to get into because there wasn't a lot of competition and you got your answers early, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, and we could almost only go up from where we were.
Exactly, right.
Yeah. So you led and published a very important paper, ECOG 1594. That trial loomed large in potentially identifying a best new doublet among the newer platinum-based combinations that were being looked at and had some different toxicities. At least that was easier. A little disappointing that they all came out at 7 to 8 months median. And I think that the take-home conclusion from that was, sadly, there was no regimen of choice, but you just had your choice of regimens. What was your feeling in the wake of those results when you presented at ASCO? Was it dejection, or was there something favorable to pull from that?
It was certainly disappointing, but on the other hand, all 4 arms were doing better than the chemotherapy we had been using a decade before that. So even though we didn't find a winner, and even though it wasn't a lot better, we clearly had moved the needle at least somewhat.
It's amazing to think how far we've come. At that time, a general oncologist didn't have to spend a lot of time studying up on the latest in lung cancer. If you were giving your regimen of choice, often carbopaclitaxel, you could keep doing that for 10 years and be right in with the standard of care. We've now gone to the other extreme, where even people who have an interest in lung cancer came back from ASCO 2018 and said, I'm out, I can't keep up with this.
Oh, yeah.
Is this becoming a real bottleneck, a rate-limiting step in our ability to improve outcomes for cancer patients, just translating the latest improvements into actual practice?
I think so. I don't see how general community oncologists can do it, because just as there's been a ton of advancements in lung cancer, there's been a ton in renal cell, melanoma, breast cancer, all the hematological malignancies. I don't see how they can do it. And yeah, I think that they probably are not getting state-of-the-art treatment as if they were seeing a disease-specific expert.
Do you sense you're still involved with ECOG, and is it difficult to get trials and clinical research out in the community because the degree of regulation, the cost, and all the hassle of it has increased a lot since we started in the field?
Yeah, the heyday, I think, of the cooperative groups were probably in the late 1990s, when there was a lot of money, and boy, you could propose just about any trial you wanted and people would do it. Things have really, really changed. Funding is down a heck of a lot. Therefore, the opportunities for doing clinical trials are way, way down. And the government, even for those trials that are open, the government does not pay enough for you to break even. I mean, you're doing it out of the love of your heart, because it's the right thing to do. I think it's going to be a real problem. In the old days, and the way I made my career was I was at the table, and I was given the privilege and honor of being able to chair some of those studies. Nowadays, there are no chairs for young junior faculty to chair.
Well, you did a lot, and you've given a leg up to a lot of people in ECOG, for instance, and you made the unusual move of stepping down long before you kind of had to. I think in the role of committee chair in the cooperative group has been somewhat like a Supreme Court justice,
yes.
and where it's occupied for a very, very long time. You stepped down of your own accord relatively mid-career and gave a big opportunity to Dr. Ramalingam, who's done great things, and it's a big opportunity. You've helped cultivate greatly the career of Dr. Heather Wakely, who's made the most of those opportunities. So can you talk about those decisions of how you prioritized developing the career of junior colleagues?
It's key for the cooperative groups to continue, and it's key because these younger people are the ones with more and more enthusiasm and more energy. And boy, if you stay into that position too long, you can get very dull, I guess is the only way to say it, not be necessarily on top of the field and not as energetic. And you want, for the sake of the group, you want the most active, most forward-thinking person to be head of it. And also for the sake of the field in general, we need to promote our junior colleagues.
And I also think it's interesting, we are at this targeted therapies and lung cancer meeting, and amazing amounts of what we do now are molecular oncology and immunotherapy, and these are things that were not the skill set that you needed as a thoracic oncologist in the 1990s or 2000s.
Right.
And so, what got you here won't get you there.
Exactly right. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just interesting. It is going to be evolving, and it's kind of like social media.
That's right.
I took a 0 on Snapchat, and you got to just leave it to the other folks.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about the nonprofit that you started, which originally was Women Against Lung Cancer. Can you talk about the genesis of this, the ideas of what you were trying to address?
So way back when, so this was right around the turn of the century, literally, I was hearing from a lot of my male colleagues grumbles about why can't women do for lung cancer what they did for breast cancer. And right around the same time, a colleague of mine at the University of Wisconsin, who was very into women's health, I happened to hear a lecture of her and talked with her afterwards, and she was commenting about how much we don't know about how diseases treat women differently. And it was just a combination of those two things. I guess we don't really know that, as well as the fact that women did not know that they could get lung cancer. Women clearly were very active in promoting health and the health of their families. Men were much less willing or able to do that. So we started an organization called Women Against Lung Cancer with the goal of promoting women scientists and physicians and trying to encourage them to get into and stay in the lung cancer field. And secondly, to make it known out there that women really do get lung cancer and they need to be active in terms of getting the resources that their breast cancer colleagues were also getting.
Since the inception of Women Against Lung Cancer, it has had some name changes and it has had some changes in focus. Can you talk about those twists and turns over the years, kind of where it went and where it is now?
Sure. So when we came up with Women Against Lung Cancer, as I said, it was to promote the knowledge of women having lung cancer and also to promote the careers of women to stay in the field. And I was surprised by the pushback, frankly, that we got from our male colleagues. Lots of satirical comments and as well from the public. A lot of men said that they, weren't going to be able to participate with us because we were a group of women. So we eventually ended up changing the name primarily for that reason. We did not want to be exclusive, and we did not mean to be exclusive by any means, but apparently we were. So we changed the name for that reason. And then we did a lot of walks and runs, both to raise awareness of lung cancer as well as to raise research monies for lung cancer. We recently have joined with the Lung Cancer Research Foundation in New York City. We've merged because they are primarily a New York City-based organization. We have a more national footprint. And together we are hoping that 2 + 2 will equal 5, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And we're very excited about it. All told, between the two of our organizations over the years have raised about $35 million for lung cancer research.
That's amazing.
Yeah, isn't it great?
That really improves the options for people. I mean, so one of the challenges in lung cancer has been, besides the difficulty in treating it, the stigma associated with it, and I think that's affected the relatively low level of funding compared to the impact it has on the country or the world. So you've tried to address that, and that's been kind of an interest of yours in terms of research. Can you talk about the effect of stigma on lung cancer as a landscape?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very real thing. I think the American Cancer Society, with obviously the very best intentions in the 1960s, when they had their campaign showing that patients who smoked were ugly, had trachs, were shriveled up little things. I think the downside of that was that people didn't like smokers anymore. And because of the fact that lung cancer was such a fatal disease, there were relatively few survivors. Originally, it was mostly men who do not advocate well for lung cancer care. That stigma has really been a significant problem. I think, however, we are slowly but surely starting to improve things. Everybody blames it on the smoker. Well, my gosh, they should also be blaming it on the tobacco companies as well, because they spent a fortune, obviously, promoting their product and promoting it primarily to younger people who don't always make the wisest decisions about healthcare, thinking they could stop whenever they want. And guess what? They couldn't.
What do you think of the new e-cigarette and vaping and things like that are great at nicotine delivery? It's a controversy now, but it's also something that, when I talk to the kids who are my own kids in high school or junior high, it is seemingly everywhere. And I don't think it has the stigma that it seems cleaner than smoking. So I think it's been quite a marketing victory.
It has been. It'll be interesting seeing if it really does prevent people from actually going back to regular cigarette smokes.
Well, and also to see how much damage it does.
Right. We don't know that yet. Right.
This is just because it takes some time doesn't mean that it's safe.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Has Free to Breathe been focused much on education for patients and caregivers, or is it mostly research efforts?
It's a combination of both. I think through our various walks and runs, the goal is to actually do both, not only to raise money for research, but to bring to that community some exposure that there is a disease called lung cancer out there, and it's a bad disease and it needs help too. And so we've been able to bring other members of the community who have either lung cancer or family members with lung cancer into the fold, so to speak. And I think right now the patient advocacy movement is really growing, not only for all cancers, but lung cancer in particular.
Yeah. No, I think that's actually been kind of a sea change.
Yeah,
along with immunotherapy and targeted therapies, one of the biggest issues has been that now at an ASCO meeting or a World Conference on Lung Cancer or many others, you have real representation, vocal representation, and and these online groups are changing things themselves. They're not waiting for it to happen, but they are trying to partner with the lead researchers in the field. They're trying to make themselves available en masse and say, we are going to lower the barrier. Yeah, we're a 1 or 2% population, but if we all go to get on this trial, this trial will get done quickly.
Right. No, that's exactly right. I think that also goes to show how the face of lung cancer is changing, because 30 years or so ago, when it was primarily a disease of older men are not so much interested in getting online today even and doing a lot of internet exploring. It's usually the somewhat more younger, more educated people who are more into getting involved like that.
Well, and I think that has kind of set the initial foot in the door was with the EGFR and ALK and ROS1 community of predominantly younger patients, very active and socially engaged. But then with that, and seeing the fruits of those labors, other groups who may not be as young or whatever, I mean, people can see the tangible benefits of banding together, and the fact that, particularly I think for rarer mutations, and people seek the connections online, and I think that the aggregating gravitational pull is stronger for rare mutations to find each other and not feel as isolated.
Right, and lung cancer until recently has been a very isolating disease. Until recently, there really were no lung cancer groups, so to speak, no lung cancer support groups. People felt very isolated when they got the disease. They didn't have anybody else to talk to.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much for joining me today for this West Wind podcast. We hope you'll be interested enough to subscribe either by checking out the options at beaconmedic.com or looking for West Wind Podcast on iTunes or wherever you find your audio content. Please take the time to submit a review, and we'd also welcome your feedback at westwindpodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, this is Dr. Jack West. Thanks for listening.